Welcome to the Nourished Brain Solutions podcast, where we leverage the power of whole foods-based integrative nutrition to optimize health, mood, energy, and the gut-brain connection. I'm Sarah Fajera, an integrative and functionally minded registered dietitian and owner of Nourished Brain Solutions in upstate New York. Let's get you nourished.
Today I have with me Danielle Aberman, a fellow registered dietitian who's here to talk with us all about migraines. Danielle, welcome to the Nourished Brain Solutions podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, you're so welcome. So why don't we just dive right in? And I'd love for you to tell those who are listening a little more about you. How did you get into migraines as a dietitian, really unique niche? And what's your background? What led you here?
Well, I think of myself as a registered dietitian times two, because I had, out of college, I, of course, became a registered dietitian, worked in the clinical setting, and then I left the clinical setting to go into the corporate world and was in medical sales for quite a while. And then after a number of years, I was diagnosed with chronic migraine. And I was very frustrated by the lack of resources for me, by the blank stares that I got from the medical profession about, how I can help myself and help me with diet. Because I think it's, there is some diet involvement. I knew that there was diet was part of it. And that frustration just led me to actually go back to pursuing the credentials that had lapsed. So I took the test and passed twice. I had to go through all that stuff all over again, but it's been well worth it. I love what I do. In terms of migraine, it's very complex. And there's a lot more to helping people that have migraine than just working with them on diet and nutrition. So I also became a certified health and wellness coach, so I can kind of take off my nutrition expert hat and coach people around areas that are not really in the scope of what a registered dietitian does.
Yes, wow. So it sounds like you've really sought to become the person who almost would have been helpful for you to have when you were in that period and looking for some answers, because you were asking and there was really no help to be found at your fingertips for using diet, nutrition, and lifestyle, it sounds like.
That's a very good way of putting it. I sought to be a resource for people trying to help themselves get better, as well as create a resource that was available to the masses.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about the path that most people are taking in trying to treat or address their migraines, what does the traditional treatment path look like? And what is the state that people are in typically when they reach out to you? Tell us about that.
Well, migraine is so prevalent. I see a lot of statistics about the prevalence in the United States, and one estimate that I saw said it was 38 million people have migraine disease, and the typical treatment is for people just to self-treat, to treat themselves with whether it's Excedrin migraine or something over the counter, and to not seek proper diagnosis and medical attention. So the traditional approach with people that have infrequent migraine is just treating themselves. Then what typically happens is they start getting worse and worse, and they're noticing that their life is shrinking. They may be completely debilitated for a few days of the month, and then they often seek help from their primary care physician. And very often their primary care physicians are great in helping them with a medication like a triptan, like sumatriptan, also known as Imitrex, or some of the other medications. And that works for a lot of people. Some people get into some trouble with overuse of that when they're migraine frequency is increasing. So they might be using some of the prescription drugs and the over-the-counter drugs and get into some trouble there. And that's what we call medication overuse, headache, or rebound. But I don't think most people fall into that trap when they just have a couple of bad migraines a month, or bad migraine attacks a month. Then I think by the time people are ready for a neurologist, they're noticing that it's not just 1 or 2 attacks a month, that it might be 4 or 5. And, they're often able to get help from their neurologist. And typically the neurologist will say, here's a medication, here's another prescription for it. But then you have people that are continuing to get worse. The medication that the neurologist tried might not be helping them. And that's sometimes where they need to seek some additional help through a certified headache specialist. But I think most people do not avail themselves to that. A lot of people don't have access. There are only about 500 of them in the country.
Wow.
In some states, there's only 1 or 2. I think one of the states doesn't have any headache specialists. So there's such a big spectrum of the disease itself, anywhere from 1 attack a month to people that have it 24/7, or that have 24 days of the month where they are significantly impacted by some of the migraine symptoms. So I would say when somebody comes to see me, they tend to be at the frequent. I think most often, they say almost every day, they have some kind of migraine symptom, whether it's vestibular symptoms or pain. And their life has really changed. It doesn't look anything like it used to. They often can't go out of the house. It's impacted their ability to hold a job. It's impacted their personal lives. They can't be the mom that they want to be. They don't like to make plans. They can't go to concerts. They can't even go to their, kids' basketball games. So very often they're pretty debilitated by the time they come and see me.
And often have individuals exhausted a lot of those medication resources? Have they usually gone through their primary, seen a neurologist, tried some different things, and still are having really frequent daily even migraines?
Yes. There are some good medications for migraine out there. There are some that are really excellent. I would say some of the medications can be pretty powerful. And about half the people that try them have success with them.
Okay.
Now, success is defined in the medical community as reducing the frequency or the intensity by 50%. So if somebody's having 20 migraine attacks a month, their healthcare provider will say it's a success if they're reduced to 10 per month. But I think if you ask the average person that has these attacks, if 10 a month is a success for them, it's not.
Yes.
So
yes.
They clearly need a different approach. And for still others, they have trouble tolerating the medications, or just the medications just might not be working for them, and they feel like they've hit a wall.
Okay, got it. So when someone comes to you and you're recognizing that there might be more at play, and you want to help to put someone on a different path to explore options beyond what they've already tried or exhausted, tell us a little bit about how you even approach a case like that as a dietitian, as a certified health and wellness coach. What are some of the things you even consider?
Well, I really try to get a sense for where they've been so far with trying to manage their migraine attacks. As I alluded to before, sometimes people can get into trouble with medication. They may be taking Excedrin migraine every day, or a combination. Some days they take Excedrin migraine, some days they're taking ibuprofen, another day they might be taking their prescription medications. And in that situation, there's a good chance that they're experiencing worsening because of the medication. So that's something that has to be addressed. Then, of course, you have some people that are not taking any medication. So sometimes people have had bad experiences with medication and can't. Sometimes you have somebody that's pregnant and they can't.
Right.
Or they are very anxious about taking medications. So we have some real serious conversations about medication. And even though that's not really in the scope of what a registered dietitian does, that's what I do because of my experience in understanding how people can get into trouble with it, as well as how sometimes people need a medication to do the heavy lifting for them. So that's really the first thing we do is we talk about medications and get a sense for appropriateness, and trying to help them work with their doctor about either tweaking medications, overhauling medications, or helping them get through a rebound cycle that they might be stuck in from overusing medication.
Yes.
But part of the problem there is if you're telling somebody that has daily symptoms and is taking medication daily, they get a little panicky at times when you say, well, you can't take those medications. So you really do need an overall approach that typically involves them working with a doctor. Mm-hmm. So after we look at medications, we have to look at what is potentially triggering the migraine attacks. So the obvious thing that a dietitian is going to work with them on is diet. So we look at trying to identify the different foods that they might be eating that are triggering the medications and not allowing their medications a chance to work.
Yes.
My good friend and business partner had been on medications for a very long period of time, but she never really did medications with diet. And then once she combined medications with migraine-oriented eating, it allowed medications to work. So she saw dramatic results with both diet as well as medication. Now, she does need both. She needs the medications as well as the diet. It's not like just because she went on the diet, she can taper the medication, but it was diet that made a big difference for her and allowed the medications to work. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about medications. We'll talk about stopping triggering with diet. And which approach with diet would we use? Would we use a diet that is like low in tyramine, lowish in histamine, low in free glutamates like MSG? Potentially, would we send them for the mediator release test? I think, Sarah, both you and I are certified LEAP therapists, so we use the MRT at times in our practice.
Yes.
That also could be helpful. Or would we try something like the ketogenic diet? So it's medications and then diet. And then the third component that I really like to focus people on is the supplements that have evidence supporting their use in helping people with that have migraine. And those would be magnesium, riboflavin, CoQ10, and feverfew, being the ones that help with taking every day. They're kind of considered supplements that have a preventive effect. And using ginger, whether it's the actual real source of ginger or the fresh source of ginger, or ginger supplements, because it can be as effective as to abort an attack as some of the triptans are.
Really?
So that's my main approach right out of the gate. Then I also have to work on other aspects of lifestyle. There's the importance of sleep, the importance of relaxation, stress management, activity. I don't like to call it exercise because a lot of people think that they have to get, on a treadmill or lift weights. It's really just regular activity. And for some people that have just been so debilitated for so long, they barely get outside. They barely do anything. That's how much their life has shrunken.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to ask you a few questions about the approach that you just described, because clearly there's a lot there to consider. So, first, I'm curious how you explain the impact that changing your diet could have on your medication dosing. Because I'm really with you in that my perspective is, one of our roles is nutrition related medication management. So, though we're not telling people, to decrease or discontinue or begin medications, I think it is our job to understand how medications fit into the overall plan and where diet could replace or influence the role of a medication, how medications influence nutrient status, things like that. So the way that I've explained it in the past, and I'm curious what the wording is that you use, is it's kind of like a threshold effect, that if you can decrease the threshold for migraine with diet, then you don't need as many medications. Is that accurate? Is there another way that you explain it? Curious
Well,
about
I'm
that.
glad you used the word threshold, because that's exactly what we're working on and what the
Mhm.
medications are working on.
Yes.
In general, the theory behind why these medications work is that they increase the person's threshold for an attack. Somebody that has migraine disease is their system over responds to normal stimulation. Like, most people without migraine can go through their life going to Target and going here and there and going to a concert or just going to a basketball game and not have an attack. But some people that have migraine disease are hypersensitive to things in their environment, like the smell of the laundry aisle, the overhead lights in a big box store, the echo in a gymnasium and the roar of crowds, things like that, as well as to foods. So the thinking behind why the medications work is it raises the person's threshold so that they're not triggered by all of those things. Or it takes a lot more stimulation or overstimulation to bring about an attack.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
where diet comes in is there are known common food triggers. Things like MSG, things that have high tyramine content. We could talk more about those. But what that does to somebody who already has hyper responsive, cranky nervous system is those foods can act just like the other things that might trigger their attack. So if you can reduce what's so controllable, like what you're putting in your mouth, and you have the medications, you're less likely to reach that threshold and actually start having symptoms.
Yes. Okay.
I know I said a lot there. I hope you
No,
followed.
yes, 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 yes. And, we'll talk about where people can reach out to you with questions in a little bit. So, but yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm with you. So I think it might be helpful to just give a few examples of some of the high tyramine or, higher histamine foods in case people aren't really familiar with those
Sure.
words.
Some of the biggest offenders that we have for migraine are things like processed meats. Of course, people will say, "Oh, yeah, I can't eat a hot dog." I mean, that's in part it's because of the processing. There are quite a few things that could be in those hot dogs that cause problems. Foods that are also high in tyramine include things like aged cheeses, like
Yes.
Parmesan cheese, blue cheese. Citrus is another common trigger. Some foods that we think of as really wholesome and healthy, like yogurt, whether it's Greek yogurt or just the traditional stuff that was around before Greek yogurt became more popular. Avocados, bananas, pineapple. These are all foods that we consider very healthy and wholesome. They can be, wonderfully, nutrient rich, But for somebody that has migraine attacks, these foods could be something that triggers them. I made myself dramatically worse trying to eat clean, eat wholesome foods. And I made myself dramatically worse because I was eating a lot of things like nuts and yogurt. Nuts, I didn't mention that. That's another common trigger. I was eating a lot of avocado, not knowing that these were common triggers.
Wow.
And my degree's in nutrition.
Wow. Yeah. And so this was when you were really struggling with the medication changes and couldn't get your symptoms under control?
Yes, this was when I had a medication that I used to rely on, maybe a couple of times a month. And then I just found myself needing it more and more. So then I was shifting toward, okay, well, let me get my diet cleaned up. Let me eat more healthy foods like avocados and bananas and yogurt and nuts.
Wow.
I made myself so much worse.
Wow. Okay, so you mentioned tyramine as one of these food chemicals. What about histamine? What are a couple of foods that are higher?
Yeah, fortunately, there's a lot of overlap in foods that are high in tyramine and foods that are high in histamine. I tend to think that more people with migraine have more of the tyramine problem rather than the histamine problem.
Oh, interesting.
But histamine is certainly an issue for a lot of people. And, we all see things through our own perspective. And I guess maybe I think tyramine's more of a problem because histamine was less of a problem for me personally. But like I said, there's overlap. So high histamine foods are going to be foods that have aged and fermented. Foods that, as registered dietitians, we always like to talk about, the importance of fermented foods in our diet, and those are pretty much out if you have a histamine problem. Wine can be an issue for people, for both histamine and tyramine. Certain berries, any fruit that's overripe can be an issue. Any other foods that you might consider overripe, the leftovers that should have been eaten in 24 hours, but somebody ate it on day 4, that could cause a really bad histamine reaction for that person. And they may not know it because it tasted fine, it smelled fine, but the histamine content in the roasted chicken from Sunday was too high for that person to tolerate.
Okay, back to that threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've talked a bit about diet. We haven't gotten to the ketogenic piece yet, but we will in a minute because I know you have a lot to share about that because it's just wow. I cannot wait to hear. I know it's exploding. So before we go there, can we talk just a little bit more about supplements? I'm curious to hear from you since you work so much with migraines. How often you feel like bringing in some supplements to augment is helpful? How often people will find relief just from pulling out histamine or tyramine or free glutamates? How do you layer in supplements, and when might someone start to consider trialing them?
Well, I feel so strongly about a couple of supplements that I really like people to try them right off the bat.
Okay.
The first one that I'm almost insistent upon is supplementing with magnesium. And this is pretty much accepted by the medical community. It's not just like something that somebody that's trying to push supplements is saying.
Right.
Because I'm very sensitive to that. I really don't like the idea of just taking supplements just for supplement taking sake. There is evidence behind the importance of magnesium for people that have migraine. And with my doctor's visits, they all talked about magnesium also, or gave me a handout with magnesium. The issue with this very important supplement is a lot of times people will just grab the magnesium that's commonly available on store shelves, and that tends to be magnesium oxide, which is excellent for constipation, but not good if you're trying to take a significant amount to help with migraine attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually recommend magnesium glycinate, sometimes magnesium threonate, because magnesium threonate is thought to potentially have a better ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. But magnesium glycinate is one that I ask people to start right away and try to get up to about 800 milligrams per day. That can be a little bit of a challenge because magnesium capsules are kind of big. So that means that you have to take quite a few in a day. But magnesium is, for me and for what I see in the migraine community, probably the most important one to take.
Okay. So that's really your first go-to.
Yeah. The next one that I would say in terms of, well, that magnesium would be a daily. The one that I really love is ginger, and that is to abort a migraine attack. There was a study done that compared the effectiveness of ginger to the most commonly prescribed abortive for a migraine, and that is sumatriptan. And they found that it had the same success rate. So
Wow.
I was very skeptical of this, and the first couple of times it didn't work for me because I was just using the spice, the McCormick ground ginger. I guess I must need a little bit more of it to work for me, so I use the ginger supplements, and I find that about half the time I don't have to use a medication. I can just get rid of my migraine with these ginger supplements.
Wow.
And I started doing it because I saw more and more people in my community having success with it. So those are my two favorite migraine supplements.
Oh, that's so helpful. Do you have a sense of what dose might be effective with ginger? What people are having success with?
You know,
Or is it a mix?
when you take the spice, it's just recommended to have, I believe it's a quarter of a teaspoon. And some people do great with that. Some people just have the fresh ginger and just grind that up or grate that into some tea. And I don't know how much they're using. I don't know if they're using like a half an inch of it. I find it easier, and for me personally, more effective to just take the capsules. And I just follow the directions that are on the jar. I think it says take 1 to 2. My stomach's a little sensitive to it, so I have to take it with a lot of food, and I usually can only take 1.
Okay,
but if you can tolerate more and you feel like you need a little bit more, then I would do the upper limit of that, which would be 2.
Yeah, that is really, really fantastic background. Since we're talking about food triggers here, is there anything that you want to mention about MRT and your experience with testing? Is just something else you're thinking about? When do you bring that into consideration?
I really like MRT for frequent and chronic migraine. I've seen success with it. I've seen people that have had something that's not on the typical migraine trigger list show up on their MRT list, and have that be something that has helped them. Like it might say corn is an issue for them. So it could be some food that's not on the typical avoid list for migraine-oriented elimination diet that really helps them.
Okay.
So I do like the MRT. Where I have some reservations about it is so many of the people that I work with are pretty sick. And they also might not have the ability or the commitment to doing what it takes to do the whole LEAP protocol. So I like it for chronic migraine. I don't love it for chronic migraine because of the challenge in actually doing the protocol.
Okay, got it. So it could potentially provide some really useful information, some different information, but someone's really got to be in the right place to make the most of it.
Yes, and in addition, I tend to also layer their results with eliminating some of the foods that are considered common migraine triggers. So, sometimes the combination of what the test shows, what I think they should be avoiding anyway, and their personal food preferences
Yeah.
end up spelling a really rough couple of weeks, and potentially somebody that just can't comply, or that I just have trouble helping them with figuring out what to eat for the next couple of weeks.
And for those who aren't familiar, too, I guess we probably should just mention MRT stands for mediator release testing, and it's a food sensitivity test that Danielle and I both integrate into our practices and see some good results with. But it does take some commitment. It really does to work, because it's not just about the test; it's about what you do with the information, right? So yeah, so that's helpful to hear too. Okay,
Yes,
so is there
absolutely.
is there anything else you want to mention about, because obviously there's a lot to say, but about food triggers before we dive into the ketogenic diet and your
Oh,
thoughts and
sure. I mean,
experience?
about the well, a lot of times I think people will say, I don't have any food triggers, because what they have done is an avoidance diet
Uh,
rather than a full migraine oriented elimination diet.
okay, tell us
So
about the difference between
I
those.
think it's really important to understand the difference. So instead of just saying, oh, well, I hear that you shouldn't have wine, aged cheeses, chocolate, and processed meats. So if they do that, that's kind of like an avoidance diet. And they might think they have everything covered. But what they do is they end up shifting to um, having foods that are also considered common triggers that they are not aware of. Like they
Mm.
might start having more citrus, more bananas, more yogurt. So in their mind, they might think, well, I did try eliminating all triggers. But what they did is they went on an avoidance diet rather than a migraine oriented elimination diet. Now,
Hmm.
what's important to understand is that with a migraine oriented elimination diet, you're only eating foods that are considered head friendly, only eating foods that are on the list of things that trigger in, or that I should say that are just considered head friendly. So they have to understand what the full list is of foods that are considered common migraine triggers, and then figure out how to structure their day and their diet on just those foods. It also
Okay.
takes a while for our nervous system to calm down. So first you
Hmm.
have to understand what to eat, and then you have to understand the duration of how long you have to eat like this. Um, so it's about managing expectations. When you go to a doctor and they start you on a migraine medication, they tell you that you have to give the migraine medication about 3 months to work, or to see if it's working. Well, it's the same thing for a migraine oriented elimination diet. You really have to commit to it, and understand what it's going to take for you to get through 3 months of this migraine oriented elimination diet. And there are great resources out there, but I think you have to understand the specifics and have an expectation that you're going to commit to it for at least 3 months. For some people with vestibular migraine, I've seen it take even longer than 3 months for them to have their nervous system and their vestibular system calm down enough from diet.
Wow. So that, that's really, I would imagine, where having strong support in place makes a huge difference, because I mean, I am not someone who's suffered with migraines, but I can imagine that if someone is in pain every single day of their lives and they're just trying to wait it out, right? 3, 4 months, more than that. Yeah, I mean, having someone like you there present, I mean, I would imagine it just makes all the difference sometimes.
It does. It's hard. My degree's in nutrition, and I really struggled with it. I struggled with, oh shoot, look at that food label. I didn't realize that, or
Yep.
it was hard. So we have this a Facebook group that really supports people in the nitty gritty, so that they can say, does anybody have a jarred a jarred spaghetti sauce that I can use? Or tell me what to buy at the grocery store that will be quick, that I could put together in 30 minutes. So we have some good resources there that will hold people's hands and give them some ideas of what they can eat, instead of focusing so much on what you can't eat. Let's talk about what you can eat, what's available in the grocery store, and then what's available that you can throw together pretty quickly. But it takes a lot, and support is really helpful.
So when you have worked with someone for whether it be 3-4 months or longer, using diet alone and really thinking about some of these common food triggers, pulling them out, maybe have done some testing, and still the migraines are too frequent, too intense, what is your next step after that?
The typical, my typical approach would be to talk to the person about trying the ketogenic diet, or if not fully having the intention of being in ketosis, at least talking to them about a very low carbohydrate diet. There are good studies about keto for migraine. There are hopefully some bigger studies that will come out that support it, but in the smaller studies, it's definitely shown a positive impact on migraine attacks. And in my practice, I see it all the time, and in our Facebook group, we see it all the time. And if you go to some of these ketogenic diet groups, people will say, yeah, I used to have X number of migraines per month, and I don't have any since being on keto. Wow. So the ketogenic diet can be a fantastic tool for a dietitian to use with somebody that is coming to her for help with migraine, and the person who is, just looking to do some research on their own.
Danielle, is it yet clear how a ketogenic diet might be helping? Do you have any sense of mechanisms or what's going on?
Yes. In part, I think of it as three different things, or three different possible ways of that the ketogenic diet is helping. First, it's a really significant switch when you switch from having the standard American diet or a mixed diet. I don't want to call it standard American diet, but you just shift to a ketogenic diet. You're not eating a lot of foods that are in most people's typical day. So you're not having grains and sugars and starchy vegetables. You also are probably eating more whole foods instead of things that are packaged in highly processed foods. So the one theory is that keto works because the person is no longer eating some foods that hadn't been identified as triggers, but that are triggers. So if they're triggered by grains and never tried going grain-free and had success on keto, maybe the problem is that they're triggered by grains, or something else. Maybe they're triggered by apples, or they're triggered by, orange juice or something. So one theory is that the person has shifted their diet away from migraine triggering foods for them. The other is that the being in ketosis has made all the difference for them. So they've gone from a carb burning machine to a fat burning machine. Some people think that that people that have migraine have some altered energy metabolism, that they have some mitochondrial dysfunction, and that their mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells, for those people do better with burning fat compared with burning carbohydrate. So that so for that person, they may need to be in ketosis, not just for following a low carb diet. There was a small study that just looked at having supplemental ketones and reducing migraine frequency. I don't know if it was frequency or severity, but they did show a positive effect of taking supplemental ketones, even though the person was not eating a ketogenic diet.
Yes.
So there might be some little magic behind having higher ketone levels circulating.
Where the ketones themselves are protective.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Where the ketones themselves are protective.
Yes, that the ketones are protective, or the ketones are helping with that person's energy metabolism, or correcting something that was awry in their system.
Sorry,
and then others believe that the reason that keto or very low carb is working is because it's reducing inflammation for that person. A lot of times when somebody's on a ketogenic diet, they have shifted away from highly processed foods. They're clearly not having any sugar, whether it's added sugar or natural sugar from fruits. So there may be an overall anti-inflammatory benefit that the person's experiencing from keto.
Okay, got it. So I'm wondering how you explain, kind of your elevator pitch to clients or to group members what the ketogenic diet is, because obviously it's all over the place. But my impression is that a lot of people are just, cutting out bread and cutting out sugar, and they think that that's a ketogenic diet. But that's not what you're talking about, especially to get these protective ketone levels. So yeah, how do you describe it for anyone who's not really familiar exactly what it is?
Well, you're right. A lot of times people will just say, well, I'm not eating bread and sugar, so I'm on a ketogenic diet.
Right. Yep. Yeah. You're like, you're on your way.
And potatoes. I don't eat potatoes anymore, so I'm keto.
Right.
But that's definitely not a ketogenic diet. The goal of a ketogenic diet is to establish ketosis.
Yes.
And typically that happens for somebody when there's a lot of variability, and there's certainly going to be variability depending on your size, your insulin sensitivity, or your insulin resistance. But it typically means that you're limiting your carbohydrate intake to about 20 to 30 grams per day. So that means you're certainly not having grains or sugars, most fruits, and that you're also eating vegetables, but that you're watching the amount of veggies and the type of veggies that you're having. You're going to have lower carb veggies. Also, to be in ketosis, you can't way overdo it with protein. So it's a moderate protein diet that is very restricted in carbohydrates and high in healthy fats. So that's how I describe it.
Yeah.
And then I'll give them particulars about what a typical day might look like based on foods that they like.
So how do you notice that being in ketosis will influence response to other more common migraine triggers? So for instance, if someone noticed that citrus was a trigger before, once they're on the ketogenic diet, does that still seem to be the case for them at the same dose? Have you noticed any trends?
Well, that's one of the things I love about keto, is that it does seem to give a lot of people kind of a force field around foods that used to trigger them. I used to be very triggered by avocado. So I'll just use my own example. I was very triggered by avocado, as well as most nuts. Once I was in ketosis steadily, I could eat nuts. I could eat avocado. It really gave me a force field. And I think a lot of people have that too. Whereas they couldn't have things like bacon or aged cheeses, because previously when they were eating like their regular diet, those things would give them an instant attack. The having cheddar cheese would trigger an attack. They can have those things when they're in ketosis because of it's kind of a force field or an increase in trigger threshold that's experienced from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that term, force fields. It's protection.
Oh, I love it because for me, when I was eating my migraine-oriented elimination diet, I just felt so restricted. And then when I switched over to keto, I just felt like I could eat so much more. I had so much more freedom at a restaurant. I'm like, oh my goodness, look at all these things I can order.
Wow. What a great point that is, because, on one hand, for many people, the ketogenic diet, might look like cutting a lot of foods out and really focusing on a smaller group. But for someone with migraine or another complex condition who, for a number of reasons, has so many sensitivities, has cut a lot out, that's pretty interesting that it could actually be liberalizing for that person and allow them more freedom with their food. Not something you think about too much with a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is a lot of times people, there are a lot of misconceptions about the ketogenic diet. You can really have a pretty varied intake with it. Of course, you can't have things in grains and sugars, and but I had a very varied diet when I was doing keto. The other nice thing about the ketogenic diet is that once you're keto adapted, once you've spent a while at 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate per day, your body is adapted to that, and it kind of likes being in fat burning mode, and it seems to have more of a tolerance for increasing your carbohydrate intake. So you can very often go from having, let's say, 25 grams of carbohydrate per day to 40 or 50 grams of carbohydrate per day and staying in consistent ketosis.
Danielle, is there a level of ketosis or maybe a range with, I'm not sure, probably blood, right? Is what you're having people check that seems effective?
I don't think there's anything that really can substantiate a certain level of ketosis.
Okay.
I think my highest level I ever achieved was like 2.3,
That's pretty high.
which for some people, that's low for them. But I was usually more along like the 1.5, 1.8. So I think it's highly variable, and I don't know that there is a certain range that people need to be in to experience migraine relief.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about the time frame that you might use with more of a, I guess, conventional migraine. What's the term you used again? Migraine migraine
Migraine-oriented elimination
diet. Yes. So you talked a little bit about the time frame, right? 3 months, a little bit more. What about a ketogenic diet? How much time do you give a ketogenic diet before you assess whether it's helping or not?
I would also give the ketogenic diet a similar time frame, because it usually it takes a few days to get into ketosis. Then it takes probably several weeks in order to be keto adapted. So it's only once your body, like your metabolism, your GI system has converted to being a fat burning machine instead of a carb burning machine, that I think you can start seeing consistent results. So I would want somebody to commit to it for, at least 3 months. And that was my commitment. Was I was planning on doing it for 3 months, and I stayed on it for 10 because I loved it.
Wow. And I mean, for your personal experience, I know you're so passionate about this, right? Because of your story. So what had happened after the 10 months? Were you able to then change things around and still experience the same reduction in migraines? What happened?
Yeah, I after 10 months, I was doing so great. I mean, it
Mm.
really I don't I don't want to say it reset my metabolism, but I kind of feel that way because I
Huh.
feel like since I was well controlled before keto, but I still was triggered. Like I still couldn't eat a lot of the common migraine triggers. But then I did keto for 10 months, and I feel like it kind of made me not get triggered by those foods much anymore. And there's still some
Wow.
foods that I can't eat. I still can't really have more than about a tablespoon of sour cream, or I have a migraine attack. But it's uh, it just was such an overwhelmingly positive experience for me and for a
Mm.
lot of people that I see on keto,
Mm-hmm.
that I highly recommend it after
Yes.
if somebody isn't having success with doing the traditional migraine oriented elimination diet.
Yes.
It's
Right.
not for everybody. It's tough. It's
Mm-hmm.
for some people
Mm-hmm.
that the lifestyle that they lead, it would just be too much of a challenge.
Mm.
Um, but I highly recommend it for people that are really struggling to find some relief in their
Yes.
diet.
Yes. 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 So you've mentioned throughout our conversation some of the, potential landmines in trying to navigate all of this as someone who's struggling with migraines without support, whether it's just doing the avoidance diet, whether it's there being triggers that you're just not aware of. You can't see the trends in what you're eating with food chemicals or certain food groups. So can you talk to us a little more about where you feel that there could be value and working with an RD, a health and wellness coach, what people could look for or should look for, when would it make the most sense for people to reach out? Where is that point where it's just not a good idea to DIY your migraine diet anymore?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to reach out and find a dietitian that has good migraine experience, so that so that he or she can guide you in an elimination diet compared with an avoidance diet.
Mm.
Um, there's a book called Heal Your Headache by Dr. Buchholz, and that's kind of the outline that I tend to follow, is the outline that's in his book. But it's really restrictive. It's hard. It's you have to it would be good to find a registered dietitian that actually can help you to focus on what you can eat instead of what you can't eat, because there's a lot of
Hmm.
food that you can eat. It's just when you look at the no list that it can be overwhelming. So I think a dietitian could really help there. Also, a lot of people that have migraine have other issues, whether it's irritable bowel syndrome or celiac disease or some other medical condition that would really benefit from talking to a professional,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
that may mean layering the diet, and you don't want
Hmm.
it to be overly restricted. Um, you want the person to still have joy in planning their meals. So that's where an RD, I think, could really come in.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so I want to hear a little more about success stories because you've just said here and there, just you've really noticed some big positive improvements. So, are there one or two stories that come to mind that really stand out, or any specific maybe outcomes from nutrition therapy that you've seen that feel important to mention so that, people know what could be different when they have someone on their team?
Sure. Well, a couple of my favorite ones are people that actually, during a phone call, I told them what I thought was probably their problem and with food. And I never had to hear from them again other than, hey, I'm doing great.
Oh,
I don't need to
awesome.
come in. Because
Awesome.
it was so obvious to me. They were having both of them. They were, it was yogurt, smoothies with protein powder, and protein bars. So
Yes.
I just told them right out of the gate, I'm like, you might not even need to come in and see me. Why don't you just take out those and see how you do? And
Uh-huh.
they were dramatically better.
Wow.
So those are success stories that they never had to come in. They just had to have a 5-minute conversation. But I think some of the ones that really stand out for me are some people that are in our Facebook group that really were debilitated. Like, one woman 2 years ago, every month she would have to go to the hospital for between 3 to 5 days
Wow.
for migraine treatment to get
Wow.
infusions and all this other support that they give her. But with the low tyramine diet and with magnesium, she's dramatically better. She can function every day. I mean, is she doing great and back to the way she used to feel? No, but she's actually able to function and have a life every day. Another person went from having serious pain symptoms 24 days of the month to only having 3 days a month where she had pain. And she did this strictly with diet and supplements with no medications.
Wow. That's amazing.
And then we have the people that have vestibular migraine, which is it's a much smaller percentage of the population. But the treatment for vestibular migraine is a little bit trickier and it's not diagnosed like it should be. But she saw that her brain fog went away like within a week of being on a low tyramine diet, and that she's steadily gotten much better by implementing the diet and supplements. And it's really changed her life.
Wow. Those are really incredible stories and outcomes. Nutrition makes a difference. What we eat really matters. No question about
Absolutely.
it. So let's just, step back for a moment and summarize what we've talked about. So, we talked a little bit about your story, traditional treatment, thought about why an individualized approach with diet and nutrition makes so much sense because every person is an individual. Talked specifically about food triggers, tyramine, histamine, free glutamates as examples, the ketogenic diet, and where the potential could be with that to really help. Some precautions, some guidance, some really great stories I'll say stories of hope, right? Because if somebody's struggling and hasn't heard this information in this way before, I hope it gives them new options, and that they can delve into and really start to take action on. So thinking about everything that you've shared and, the type of people that you're working with, are there any other thoughts or ideas that feel important, as we start to wrap up?
I think something we didn't really talk about, and that is how isolating migraine can be. The American Migraine Foundation says about 50% of people with migraine have anxiety. And the anxiety piece is part of migraine. There's also a lot of isolation that goes along with migraine because it's a stigmatized disease. So I think it's important for people to feel like they're getting better and they're part of a community that's getting better. So I think just reaching out to other people that are really trying to get themselves better, not people like, that want to wallow in self-pity, but people that are committed to kicking migraine to the curb and getting themselves better. So I think you have to seek that out in some way.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of resources would you suggest?
Well, myself and 4 other people that have been diagnosed with chronic migraine and or vestibular migraine um, we have a website called migrainestrong.com. It's a blog on, actually today's blog is excellent. It's on anxiety.
Oh,
Um,
great.
I think that's a great resource for people that are trying to understand a little bit more. It's also a great resource if they don't have fantastic access to medical care. Like I said, there might not be many neurologists in somebody's location, or they might not have any headache specialists in their area. So it's good to continuously try to educate yourself. And there's also a Facebook group that I'm part of with the same group of people called Migraine Strong. And it's a community where people are all trying to get better and trying to boost everybody's spirits. And it's not, painting a smiley face on something that's really crummy, but it's people in various stages of migraine-oriented eating, as well as other lifestyle changes that can help. They also share a lot about different medications that are working with them, because we realize that very often the medication is needed for the heavy lifting, but diet and lifestyle also helps to allow the medications to work. Mm-hmm. So it's good to have that community and to be continuously educating yourself about how to kick migraine to the curb.
Mm-hmm. So Danielle has just offered out community for support. So yeah, if you're just, listening to this and you're struggling with migraines, you're feeling really alone and just needing some resources, some new ideas, it's Migraine Strong is the name of the Facebook group. So they would just go to Facebook and type in Migraine Strong and they would find it, Danielle?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And then you mentioned your blog. Is there anywhere else where people could find you, especially if people have questions? What is the best way for them to reach out to you?
You can reach me by email would be the best, Danielle.Aberman@gmail.com. You can also contact me through the Facebook page or through the blog.
Phenomenal. Danielle, thank you so much for sharing all of this really valuable information and your invaluable experience, because, man, just knowing nutrition is one thing, but having had years of application and being able to share it is just really invaluable. So thank you for your time and, and for just being there for those who are struggling with migraines.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for doing this and for bringing attention to migraine, because it's a lot of people just don't know that you can actually get better through diet and lifestyle. So I appreciate you for asking me to be here.
Yeah, you're so welcome, Danielle. Any closing thoughts?
No, just, if you're feeling really down and you feel like it's just your migraine condition's just getting worse, there is a lot of hope out there. There's help, and there are ways to get yourself better.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much again, Danielle. Take care.
Thank you.
Hi there, Sarah Fahara here, owner of Nourished Brain Solutions. It's my goal with this podcast to explore strategies for empowered and well-informed food and eating decisions. If this information has been supportive to you, please share with your friends and leave me a review up on iTunes. To learn more about how food is impacting the way you feel on a day-to-day basis, head over to my website at www.nourishedbrainsolutions.com for a free copy of my food mood journal. We'll see you soon.